People have been trying to scare each other since the internet was like, invented. Like back in the richer days of creepypasta or copypasta, it's always been trending to try to scare or gross out or just diminish the mental state of your fellow online users. Lots of people seem to have this little goober in their brain that just yells at them to scare a person. So what happens when you put that goober in the brain of a person that really, really likes ponies? My Little Pony horror, baby. My Little Pony is no stranger to horror. It's actually kind of the opposite. So much so that if you want to find My Little Pony horror, you don't have to look up scary or horror. You usually find these stories through the term grimdark. I've never seen it used for other fandoms, at least not as much as My Little Pony does. But I'm already a bit ahead of myself. We know that My Little Pony and horror go hand in hand, so why is it relevant right now? TikTok is known for harvesting trends for like about a day or two and then letting them fly by. Controversies or celebrity deaths will be relevant for about a day or even a week and then die out and go to the next best thing. But what does it mean when a trend is able to last more than a whole month? Somehow this trend began on TikTok where people would create My Little Pony infection stories. People would tell these spooky stories where the world of these colorful horses suddenly turns like grim and dark. Get it? It's funny because it's grimdark. Originally, I was just gonna cover horror in general on TikTok's platform, but when I was doing research for that video, I just kept getting more and more of these My Little Pony infection videos, and I didn't really know what to do. There were like way too many, and that fascinated me, So instead, we're gonna cover that. So grab your pony plush and grab a snack and sit back while I run through a quick history of My Little Pony horror and its modern apprentice. If you clicked on this video, there's a high chance you've already heard this run through like a billion times, but I'll just give a brief one anyway. My Little Pony was an animated children's show that began airing in October of 2010. It was made to promote and sell the line of My Little Pony toys that were started in 1981. And sometimes you forget entirely that the show was made for that purpose before anything else. Just a way to get little girls to buy silly little toys. The animation isn't stellar or amazing, but the writing can be. It's made mainly for children, but that doesn't stop it from having good character development and interesting story arcs. So it was no surprise that despite the main demographic being little girls, the second biggest audience for the show was suddenly adult men. Insert 4chan, the most respectful and kind platform in the world, I know. Many people on the platform were mocking My Little Pony back when it was first releasing, talking about how dumb the show was and ironically watching it. And then over time it wasn't ironic anymore. Somehow, the show was able to charm a huge portion of users on 4chan, and that began the huge pile of shit that was the early My Little Pony fandom. This is where the term brony became a thing. And for anyone who doesn't know, brony is defined as a man who is a fan of My Little Pony television program and a range of toys. And this doesn't mean that adult women weren't also in the fandom, but it was always men that were in the spotlight whenever the fandom was caught doing something unsavory. I won't cover any of the controversies or gross things that happen in detail, mainly because I don't want to. So much inappropriate and not child-friendly stuff happened, which included horror stuff. People love to take cute things made for children and make it into a space for adults, which I wouldn't have an issue with if they didn't post all of the adult content on platforms that children can find. So tell me here, if you post inappropriate content that is related to a kids show and post it on platforms that children go to in order to consume content of the kids show, what stops the child from consuming the inappropriate content? Nothing. At the time, My Little Pony episodes were all on YouTube, and the recommended tab is obviously going to recommend pony content. And sometimes it was great. It was loving and kind, showing projects like Snowdrop or Don't Mind a Night, the My Little Pony version. All the beautiful animations that were child-friendly and expanded on fan creation and, just expanded the fandom in general. But then when you would keep clicking on these videos for a little while, you would eventually run into a fan animation called cupcakes. I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't explain it, so let me start off with the definition of grimdark. Grimdark is a subgenre of speculative fiction with a tone, style, or setting that is particularly dystopian, immoral, and violent. And this isn't to be confused with like gothics or just general horror, because those are generally like mysterious, scary, and grimdark is like just bad. It's like just violent and, grim. My Little Pony wouldn't label their horror fanfics as creepypasta or anything like that. They adopted the term grimdark for all of their horror content. The earliest, or at least the most popular early one of these grimdarks, was titled Cupcakes. I'm not gonna delve a lot into it, but essentially it was just a torture fic of the character Pinkie Pie turning Rainbow Dash into, you're not gonna guess this, cupcakes. It's a lot of words, and that's it, it's just a lot of words. The writing is not good. it's very convoluted. Despite that, it was still the first time that it ever happened, and that automatically makes it revolutionary. Soon enough, other scary stories were made following it. We have Pinkie Pie being an evil baker that uses ponies to make cupcakes, so why not Rainbow Dash being an evil harvester that uses ponies to make rainbows? Everyone's so creative, guys, good job. This happened to like every character, I'm pretty sure. Rarity got Little Miss Rarity, which was bad. Applejack got the Apple Sleep Experiment, which was
actually very good.
Fluttershy got Stay Out of My Shed, which is automatically bad since it was made by Hot Diggity Demon, who was an asshole at the time. And Twilight got... what did she get, actually? For Twilight, I know that her general thing was being the mad scientist, but I don't remember if that had like an actual grimdark at the time. And speaking of which, a super popular subgenre of grimdarks is to read and voice act them out in video form, and that's how I was exposed to it when I was younger. The Lost Narrator is one of the best examples of this. They read out fanfictions and provide detailed illustrations from various artists to follow their readings, but there were many, and they were all easy ways for all parts of fandoms to find this grimdark content, which is how a bunch of children, including wee little Bee, I'm Bee by the way, to finding all of this horror and inappropriate content at the time. So good job, guys. On a lighter note, I'm an adult now, which means I can not only consume this content appropriately, but I can judge it better. So here's my short and unofficial rating of grimdarks. Some are stiff and boring, but I think that's just my overexposure to them talking at this point. Cupcakes was bad. It's on like a bunch of worst creepypastas ever list for a reason, but there's others that I do like. Rainbow Factory felt like a much better grimdark than Cupcakes ever was, since it used genuine character connection and fear to propel its story. Nothing like Cupcakes ever tried to do. Little Miss Rarity was a creepy fetishized thing, whilst other Rarity grimdarks were much more fun. Currently, I don't really see as many grimdarks that are just torture fics, and above that, I don't see grimdarks being made in general. Maybe they're just not getting popular, but it feels like a type of fiction that's just gone by time now. Maybe it's for the best, since, well, My Little Pony is a children's media, and it shouldn't be corrupted by Finally, the main thing that I wanted to talk about. We're finally here. That was a lot of exposition that I didn't mean to talk so much for, but here we are. I haven't seen any My Little Pony horror content like on my own for years. I mean, I've seen videos covering it, but never been exposed to it on my own for so long. And one day I was just on my For You page, 3 a.m. because I'm on break, so I don't have to worry about sleeping. And I get this random chapter from someone's horror story. It's like a TikTok slideshow with My Little Pony characters and framed to surround a story where an infection is spreading. I thought this was great because, like, as I mentioned way back, I wanted to make a TikTok horror video, and I thought this was cool because it fit into that. So I went through their entire story. It was a good little spook, some scary images that reminded me of like analog horror type of stuff. I saved the profile and went to bed, and I did not expect what happened the next morning. Like, I don't know, like some kind of plague. Get it? It just spread all over my TikTok feed. It became this cesspool of just My Little Pony Infection AUs. Also, for anyone who doesn't know, at this point, AU means alternate universe. I ran into that original account on like January 5th, and somehow the earliest post I saw at this point was dating back to like December 10th. So somehow I was late, but also not, because not a single one of these stories was completed yet. All of them had the same premise. The world of My Little Pony becomes infected with a virus that spreads to many ponies. That's the main connection, but some stories tell it different. The majority of them use this visual style that reminds me of those like random Russian edits. I don't know if you know the ones I'm talking about. They're these ones where they would take PNGs of ponies and edit them into random environments in real life, usually with like a somber tone or a happy tone, it depends on the edit. They'll edit the ponies into like forests and cabins and edit them to either be bloody or scary, which I think is pretty neat. But if not that, they will entirely illustrate their stories, which I think is like insanely cool. The most popular of these infection AUs, and supposedly the main starter to them all, is Smile Disease. I'll give a brief summary on the story of Smile Disease. The story begins with spread. Hi, this is Post-Editing B, and I don't think I can really cover Smile Disease without first covering what I believe was its main inspiration. After reaching out with some people in the community and hearing from different people, I was able to connect a few dots, and I found out that the main contributor and inspiration for a lot of people was a creator by the name Osushat. Osushat made the first of the whole infected My Little Pony things and has never really gotten any credit for it. He made the reference sheets, and he had like the main basis idea that everybody does for their infection AUs, and somehow still seems to be one of the least popular in the entire like fan space, which I don't really think is fair. Smile disease is obviously the most popular one, which is why I wanted to cover its story. But after, talking with these people and then checking out Osushat's story on my own, which all of his posts predate smile disease, the inspiration, at least in my opinion, is super clear. For him to not be able to get the recognition that smile disease got when he obviously had such a huge influence on it felt unreasonable and silly. Again, this is after I recorded everything and got all of my information, so I won't be able to credit Osushat whilst I'm describing smile disease, but I just thought I'd leave this in. So before I get to smile disease and describing it, detailing it, whatever, I'm first going to talk about Osushat's Pestraobia series. The story begins with a quick summary of the disease. It's a flesh-eating and mind-eating disease that emerged from a normal cold. Starlight coughed near workers who were near nuclear waste, causing the sickness within them to mutate into what is now known as Pestraobia. I think that's how you pronounce it. I looked it up to see if it meant anything. It translated to variegated, which is like different color zones and leaves and stems and fruits and plants, whatever. This is where we first see the reference sheets for all of these infection AUs. They show the stats and multiple effects that ponies may be going through. Starlight Glimmer is going through a depression and is currently missing. Unlike most of the other universes that I've seen, it appears that this universe has adapted to the disease and is doing its best to fight against it. Rainbow Dash is fully suited up, and so is Pinkie Pie, who is now going by Pinkamena. Both of them are ready to take care of people who are infected, whether it's, locking them up or violently. Next, we see that there's a facility where they keep the infected, either to test or contain or to try to cure, whatever. Nurse Redheart is the main medic and Marble Pie is a helper medic. Twilight is infected and her Pestraobia is now at 67%. Unlike most of these universes that will show if they are infected or not at the top simply, this will usually have a meter at the bottom that shows how developed their infection is. Fluttershy is trying to find a cure, unsuccessfully at this point. Applejack is infected, her Pestraobia at 56%. She has no mouth and her eyes are fully sunken in. Rarity is also infected, with her Pestraobia at 89%. As for the princesses, Luna is completely healthy, but taking care of Celestia, who has basically become a skeleton of herself. She cannot speak, but she seems to be alive. Cadence is seeking refuge for her and her daughter, whilst the state of her husband, Shining Armor, is unknown. We then see that the survivors of the main six, who are Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy, are currently looking for Starlight. Then we find out the Shining Armor is at 89% in his infection. Trixie is looking for Starlight, and Sunset Shimmer is back in town wondering what has happened to her original world. But the main issue now is, Rarity has escaped her enclosure, her infection nearly at its full rate. Osushat starts to incorporate people's original characters into the mix, showing their stats, infection status, and my personal favorite of these original characters is the Bizarre Bong one. It looks absolutely stunning in my opinion. Then we see the first of a pony that is certainly not healthy, but also not infected. At least not that we know. Sapphire Shores' neck is elongated and her eyes are shriveled up. As well, Lotus is entirely unknown in every aspect of herself. We see then that after cutting off an infected's head, their body is still able to roam even without the brain, which I think is to imply that the infection not only needs to be in their brain, as long as it's in their body, it's able to take control over them. As mentioned earlier, Rarity was able to break out. Sweetie Belle, who had been wondering where her sister was, finds Rarity looking into her room through a creek. Now we get a decent update about what Pestraobia is. It's a disease that acts similarly to a cold at first before becoming the flesh-eating disease that we've seen now. Wounds can be infected through parasites as well, which leads to the more insane characters that we've seen due to the constant feeling of their flesh being eaten away, especially that of their brain. Though it also says sometimes that it can be a full placebo or hallucination, and that there would never be a parasite to begin with. We see more characters that have weird states, not exactly infected but also not normal either. Daring Do is weirdly elongated, while Flim and Flam have become one entity entirely. They're labeled as a test subject though. Twilight is now the first to be cured, her Pestraobia gone and her mental state completely off, which is where I want to interject with my own idea. I saw earlier that the Pestraobia can cause their consciousness to slowly fade the more that it develops, and I think that that can slowly cause them to forget their memories, their ideas, and whatever. It says in one of the story blocks for Twilight that she seems to be fascinated by ponies, calling them cute as if she isn't one herself, and that she's becoming interested with things that she should already be familiar familiar with, which to me translates to she is forgetting stuff that she should already know because she's not herself anymore. Twilight finds an infected Applejack coming into the infirmary who is seeking help, but she can't really ask for it because she doesn't have a mouth. Twilight offers to treat her missing mouth, but instead she takes her eyes and disfigures her face entirely. After that, the nurses find her doing that and safely put her back in her enclosure and can do nothing for Applejack. One day, Starlight goes back to Trixie's home, begging for reconciliation and forgiveness. Trixie accepts after a bit of her just wailing on the floor and ends up leading her down to the basement because Starlight ended up asking for help. Trixie pulls out a gun, explaining that Starlight would never ask for somebody's help. She believes that this Starlight is a changeling and ends up killing her. Once again, Osushat involved even more original characters and their implementation into the world, which all look pretty stunning. Discord is a very magical creature. He's literally labeled the embodiment of chaos. So after being infected, it seems that his wild magic mixed with the disease and has turned him into this terrifying and almost unrecognizable figure. We then see Sweetie Belle again, seemingly after she's been infected by Rarity, who got her in her room, and she looks a bit infected now. Right now, Starlight Glimmer is a destroyed and infected mess. Her stats are unreadable and her body is absolutely nothing like it once was. Zecora is still alive, healthy, but you know, not doing the best that she could be. She sees this miserable and pained version of Starlight on the ground, but unfortunately can't really do anything for her. Twilight is then confronted by another Twilight, not a doppelganger or some kind of infected monster, but the one from the Equestria Girls universe who traveled through the portal. So brief summary, Equestria Girls is just a humanized version of the ponies, and the portal to this other universe is hidden in the castle of the two princess sisters. Our Twilight threatens her with the monster infected that we have seen before, and the Equestria Girls Twilight threatens her with the eyes of a creature that we have yet to see. This then transitions and gives us a look into a new group that is started called Group Oblaria. This consists of the Equestria Girls Twilight and another random pony that I've never seen before but seems to be from the show. We get to see Cozy Glow after she wasn't necessarily infected, but instead overridden by maggots. The text in this block is actually written in Morse code, which I was able to decipher in like 5 minutes, and I'll put it on screen right here. It says, maggots crawled about in and about her body as she laid still on the dirt path, twitching and convulsing as the maggots feasted on her flesh. I personally think that she might have been killed by an infected, and before it could have gotten bad, she was overridden by maggots or something similar. Or it could have just been some like really strong, huge maggots, because this doesn't really look like a typical maggot I've seen. Another member of Group Oblaria is Chrysalis, but once again, not in her normal form. She towers over the other ponies, nearly 6 times as tall as the Equestria Girls Twilight. This version of Chrysalis has the same piercing red eyes that stood behind Twilight from the Equestria Girls universe while she was threatening the Twilight from our universe. And as of right now, that is where Pestraobia ends. I love the horror in this one. It's simple edits, but they lean more towards Uncanny Valley than gore, which personally that scares me way more. As well, the integration of the Equestria Girls universe leaves me curious. I can't wait to see the updates and potential finish for this story, especially because it kind of implies that there's something going on in the Equestria Girls universe as well, but not something that's connected to the pony world. And now I'll be covering the story that is by far the most popular on TikTok, Smile Disease. The story begins with spreadsheets of our characters. The sheets show the sanity, stress, hunger, and the thirst of all characters. It also provides visuals to show how the characters are progressing. Applejack is slowly losing it as she's separated from her family. Rarity lost her vision from an attack and is just recently infected. Fluttershy's health is unknown, and Twilight is entirely insane as the first person to ever be infected with Smile Disease. Rainbow Dash seems to be the first victim of Smile Disease, being a victim of Twilight and losing her jaw. Pinkie Pie is gone, her status unknown as she left Ponyville. Smile Disease actually has these spreadsheets for many characters, including side characters only seen occasionally in the show. The only important of these side characters though is Nurse Red Heart, the one who is in desperate search for a cure. Unlike the show, the princesses in this story have concern and try to help with the conflict. Not that it does much, as they're just as likely to be overtaken by the disease. We find out a bit later that Pinkie Pie left Ponyville in search of Nurse Red Heart, as she knows that she is immune. She offers herself to the nurse, letting her immunity save others even at the cost of her life. At this point, we have some more statuses of side characters. The first victim of Twilight herself was Spike, being instantly mauled by her when she was infected. As well, we learn about the reason behind the disease's creation. In the show, Twilight is sent to Ponyville by Celestia in order to make friends, since Celestia believed she was too focused on her studies to make connections. In Smile Disease though, Twilight doesn't even get past the first episode of the show, which is a bit confusing because the first 2 episodes of the show are about defeating Nightmare Moon and restoring Luna, but in Smile Disease, Luna is already back to normal. Chalk it up to it being an alternate universe for confusion's sake. Twilight decides that she's gonna do the opposite of what her teacher told her to do, and instead tries to make a potion that will automatically make people be her friend, so she doesn't have to take time from her studies to make those friends. And surprise, surprise, it goes wrong, and the potion becomes a disease that is transmitted from person to person through bites and saliva, and it causes people to smile uncontrollably and bite people. The disease stings their mouth, and it causes burning, eventually just taking their entire jaw, and then spreading to their cheeks and eyes. They are apparently not technically smiling, it's just nerves and destroyed gums forcing their lips out and up. Over time, as the disease spreads and once it reaches the brain, the person loses all control over their body. Over time, it will overrun the body and kill the person with it. As well, there is a mutated version of the disease. It causes the innards of their face to mutate and split out of their face, and causes infected eyes. Their mouths don't force into a smile, rather mutate and rot. Later on, Pinkie Pie is fully sacrificed and makes an immunity for the disease. However, once Nurse Redheart acquires it, she becomes a mutant. Nurse Redheart was able to use the cure she got from Pinkie Pie on herself, now being the first ever pony to be cured from the disease. Around the same time, we learn that Maud Pie, which is Pinkie Pie's sister, is also immune, which tells us that the Pie family is made to be immune of this disease. As well, Marble Pie, another sibling, is sacrificed against her will for a cure to the disease. I believe that the reason for this is that Pinkie Pie is known for smiling. She literally has a song called Smile, so I guess it's just a fun thing to make her and her lineage immune. Maud Pie finds Apple Bloom and leads her to safety, seeking out Zecora to try and find a cure. Zecora tells them to enter the portal to another world, the one from the spin-off Equestria Girls. Zecora leads Maud Pie and Apple Bloom through the portal, and it's when Apple Bloom jumps through the portal that we see Apple Bloom was bitten before jumping in, officially bringing the virus into the other world. You might have noticed that when I talk about how this disease transmits and affects people, I don't say ponies, I just say people or person, and that's because it can transmit through any species, it seems, because now it has affected the world of Equestria Girls. I'm not going to call it Equestria Girls anymore, I'm just going to say EG. At this point, the series just describes the citizens of EG being infected or mutated, and not much else before the EG Twilight finds a cure for an infected EG Rarity. It ends with the few survivors of the EG world, Twilight, Sunset Shimmer, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, and Rarity, in an open field fleeing to live in a remote area. And that was it. That was the ending of Smile Disease. Smile Disease is definitely the most popular of the Infection AUs, but not my personal favorite. It's one of the very few to have an ending at all, but it left the ties of the pony world loose and left me kind of confused. It's not awful though, and it was a fun read with a few good spooks, and I generally had fun reading it. And of course, you can't deny that it was the first main inspiration for many other horror creators on TikTok. Agoraphobia is the name of the first ever Infection AU that I saw, and pretty interesting in its story. I'm not gonna over-explain this one, just summarize a few key points. I like the scares in it. The monsters are infected in the story, are very much more analog horror scary than gore scary, which I like a lot. As well, as at least from what I know, the main cause of the virus is unknown still, which I think adds a good bit of mystery. And the best part, and spoiler warning, the story is insanely accurate with how the princesses would act in the situation. In this rendition of the infection story, the princesses literally leave and take residence on the moon, and that is the most show accurate thing I've seen from a piece of fan fiction ever, and I adore it. As I mentioned earlier, some of these creators make their stories fully illustrated, and the best example I've seen of it is this one created by 100 Days Later. He has made a horror infection type universe that keeps the same vibe of ponies in real locations, but rather than PNGs, the ponies are entire illustrated by him, and it just looks super pretty. And while on the illustration thing, some of the best fan art I've seen for any fandom has been for these Infection AUs. Most of it is fan art for Smile Disease, but I've seen it for a bunch of other stories, and it's always super well drawn. I mean, just look at these Rainbow Dash renders from Smile Disease. They're insane compared to the original one, which is just an edited PNG. And while we're on there, just look at this generally cool stuff. And oh my gosh, it all looks amazing. Look at this Pinkie Pie art. Look at how sick this Pinkie Pie art is. When I was scrolling through the tag, I even found a whole cosplay for this. It is so cool. The art for this community is always so unique and just special, and I love seeing fan creations like this. But before I continue from this point on, there's a small thing that I wanted to bring up for my own, clarity and sake. Some creators say that they've been seeing the infection post for months, like way back in October. So my question for a little bit has been, what was the first ever infection alternate universe? Writing the script and going through all of these different TikTok accounts kept bringing me a sense of nostalgia, one that I couldn't really pinpoint, and I figured that it was just the horror element, as grimdark was such a significant chunk of my childhood, but that wasn't it. It took embarrassingly long to finalize what that nostalgia was, but I finally did. It wasn't just the TikTok AUs or My Little Pony Grimdarks, it was both of them. I have a good idea of where the first infection alternate universe stems from, and even then I can't be entirely certain, but it certainly predates Smile Disease and Osushat by a little bit, by a few days, a few months, and a few years. The first infection slash virus, whatever version of My Little Pony, was 8 years ago, written by Ebon Main and narrated by the Lost Narrator. The Cough is a short fanfiction detailing the main 6 taking refuge inside of a house whilst the rest of the world lives fighting off a disease. The earliest sign of the disease is a cough. Fluttershy coughs whilst in a refuge with the others and is bucked to death by Rainbow Dash. At the end, in the silence of the room, somebody coughs again. The language in this grimdark is very specific. No cure, contagious, outbreak. It's pretty obvious that the main idea was that there was a virus spreading through the world. I'm also just glad I got to revisit it. It's a super short read and has a bit of lesbian angst that, always makes me want to curl up in a corner and sob and, pop like a balloon. I stand with Fluttershy X Rainbow Dash content until the day that I die. The only reason this trend has been able to avoid dying within the first week was because of the fan creation. After Smile Disease, people just kept making these alternate universes, and then fans of those fans made their own, and then fans of those fans of, etc, etc. But it's this continual thing that only pushes forward due to fans continuing to create and add to it. Again, not every universe in this is the same. I saw one where the infection actually began in the EG universe and was then brought to the pony world. And then I saw another one where it was asking the audience to decide what the main character should do, kind of like ARG style, and I thought that was cool. Each alternate universe is a little different from one another, whether it's having different origins of the virus or making the effects of the virus different. The original and first one I ever saw had the characters become monsters of themselves, creating doppelgangers. Some others I saw simply mutated the characters, giving them elongated necks or malformed bodies. Whatever the changes, I eat it up every time, so what does it matter, right? They're simple, they're concise, they're just good little spooks to have every now and then. Some are more gross and gory than others, so if you want to consume that content, just be safe in what you digest. My favorite thing to ever cultivate from all of these stories though, is that nearly every single infection alternate universe story has used the song Old Doll from Mad Father as a background track. I love Mad Father, and any recognition for it and its soundtrack is a win for me. We did it, boys! To conclude this video, I was actually able to reach out to the creator of the original Infection AU that I saw first, and is the whole reason this video is being made. Also, I know what you may be thinking. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to interview the creator of Smile Disease? Well, yes, they didn't get back to me. So here's a brief and exclusive interview with the creator of Agoraphobia, My Little Pony Bun.